Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia, and Commander, enemy is discovered hiding behind the like button. Destroy it, Commander, and achieve our victory. Hello everyone. This is the summary for the day of 942 for the 22nd of September. I am sad to say this is the second time I recorded this. The first time recorded, the mic setting was wrong. There is no sound in my mic. Oh my god, I wasted half of my life. I mean, half an hour of my life. So, and I published it, and then people was commenting there's no sound. So like, yeah. So here I am again, re-recording again. So if I have low energy, let me just pardon me because I've not gone through this once already. I'm so sad. So we're gonna go from Kherson this time round and doing anti-clockwise direction. Over at the Kherson front, we have shelling reported at Antonivka, Unherlets, Takarivka, as well as Pridniprovsky. There is also geolocation of airstrikes over in the Mikhailsky or Darivka region and Vasily. So, and the Ukrainian Defense Ministry continue to report about some Russian attacks against towards the Pridniprovsky direction, which we continue to have no other information from any other source. No one else is talking about it. So it is what it is. So we're going to move on into the Zaporizhia front. At the Zaporizhia front, as I alluded to, there's always a possibility that it's not a real offensive, and this seems to be the case again. There's only one report of fighting reported at Robotine, according to the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. So this is the only report of the fighting at Zaporizhia front. There's no more other fighting, despite it looks really happening yesterday, with no attacks at Petikaki, Andriivka, and Danilivka and whatnot. The fighting reported at Huepole also did not continue in the past 24 hours. So the past day. So it is what it is. So we move on into the Donetsk front, which is the main thing that's currently happening. A lot of things happening around here. Over at the Velika Novosilka sector, there's shelling reported at Temerivka. Fighting is reported at Makarivka, but this is related to the geolocation we have yesterday regarding the Russian using motorcycles, and they blow up some bridges and whatnot. There's also fighting reported at Zolota Neva and Shtaske. So, but this is going to be part of the next chunk of information I'm going to talk about, which is around the Voleda front. So, at this region here of the Donetsk front, of course, as mentioned, Zolota Neva and Shtaske was under attack. The Russians also attacked in the area of Preshestivka. And according to Ukrainian mapping, it seems like they have captured a huge amount of grounds. The Ukrainians also admitted to some huge amount of grounds being taken by the Russians in the Verdiane region, as the Russians secure the southern flank of Verdiane. And the Russians have now attacked towards Voleda and captured the Dacha region, which is significant. Russians are now attacking towards Bohov, Yafelenka, Katerinivka, and Konstantinivka. And we're going to zoom into this area here because this is where the situation is getting very, very tricky for the Ukrainians. So according to the Ukrainian mapping, they have now shown that the Russians is now on the pincer. They are basically almost like panicking within their post. They wrote an exclusive post regarding this area here, and in their updates, this includes the Russians taking the Dacha, which is a surprise to me. This Dacha, the Russians have, this is a recapture of the Dacha. The Russians have previously captured this Dacha region around 2 years ago in the first year of war. And after that, after some very pathetic offensive operation towards Voleda, which failed tremendously, the Russians have never come back again successfully. So according to the Ukrainians, the threat is now very serious. There's only a few roads left for the Ukrainians to redraw, and the Russians are now on the verge of a pincer against Voleda, and this is creating some kind of panic, and this panic is of course very unwarranted because it is the Ukrainians themselves that did not want to talk about the truth. Suddenly, this such a big intel drop and makes it look like as if there's some very serious shit has happened. But this is actually not exactly the case, because the Russian mapping, as you can see, has already no, this is the Russian mapping, has already alerted to this kind of a change. It's not exactly such a big change if you look at the Russian mapping. But if you look at the Deep State UA's mapping, so this is the Deep State UA's map, and this is Voleda, as you can see. So if you look at the frontline change, the change is huge. Across just 24 hours, the frontline changes become ridiculous. But actually it's not so much. It's because they play with the gray zone. So if you draw out the gray zone, so this is the original gray zone that they have. But if you overlay it with the latest mapping, as you can see that the Russians actually did not progress a lot. It's just a little bit. So it's just that it's just a little bit over here, and of course attacking to the west. And of course, there is still additional gray zones, which also might suggest Russian advances around further. But of course, they're definitely not going into Voleda itself for sure, I think. And but this is the thing about the gray zone that I have always been talking about, because the usage of the gray zone for them is always to cover up worse situation. The situation might actually be worse than what they have reported, but they use the gray zone to cover it up. And sometimes it works, because the Russians did not push harder later. But like in these instances, the offensive was very real, and at DPA we have already mentioned this, very serious situation. But it's like they just cannot cover up this anymore. The situation has become so dire that there is only two roads. You can see there's this one road, there's two roads leading to Voleda, and effectively there's only this road that they can actually use, and it leads up. The Russians are now on the verge of cutting the roads because of this force that's coming around here, and this mapped area is firm control, which means that if you look at the gray zone, on the Deep State US mapping, the Russian force actually already arrived at one of this road, and they're going to head to the next road to cut off this road. The other road is actually over here, and they are on the very verge of getting pincered, and so they're going to cut this road very, very soon if this continues in the next 1 to 2 days. So that's why the panic has set in, and suddenly they decided to tell you the truth, which is like, for me, is they should just tell the truth. They should just repent and tell the truth, because what's the point? This is like, eventually reality will have to catch up. They have to admit to certain information eventually. So anyway, the situation is horrible for the Ukrainians here, and this is also a much smaller pincer than I expected the Russians would do, because I expected them to go for a bigger one towards Bohovye as the point of contact, or Novoukrainka. But somehow the Russians decided to go for a smaller pincer, and so this also, of course, the capture of the Dacha is a big surprise, with the Russian forces retaking this area that they have previously taken 2 years ago. So this is a pretty significant change in terms of the tactical situation, which means that the Russians could immediately attack into the city itself. Whether Ukrainians will decide to continue to hold remains to be seen. Voleda is one of the most heavily bombarded city in Ukraine. It probably received more bombs than most other cities. So we shall see how this continue to develop. The Russians also has consolidated the entire south of Vodiane. So they are consolidating the situation around here, allowing them to continue to attack. And the roads here is very minimal. There's not a lot of roads. I've covered this before, but there's one road leading up here. This road is probably gone already. The Russians are within striking distance. The other road, there's another road over here. I believe there's some kind of link somewhere. Yeah, it's probably along the forest here. So this is the other road that the Russians are now on the verge of attacking and cutting. So this junction will be the key So this junction over here will be the key because everything here will be within striking distance of the Russians. So this is the one. And your Russians are really close to it. We're talking about a distance of merely 2 kilometers. So sounds far, but also you're thinking of like the Russians capturing 4 square kilometers. This is 3.7 square kilometers. So like the Russians are progressing very quickly around here. It's unclear if the Ukrainians have the forces to actually hold back the Russians around here. So we shall continue to monitor, but just like I mentioned, the Ukrainians, if they have been more honest on the mapping, then this wouldn't be such a surprise for the the pro-Ukrainian crowd. Like for the pro-Ukrainian crowd, they just keep getting shocked. These emotional damages are very serious. It's just suddenly, things are perfectly fine, flower and rainbows and butterflies, and then suddenly, boom, one nuclear bomb just dropped for no apparent reasons. So yeah, it is what it is. Over the Kurakovo direction, there is shelling reported at Constantinople, but this is very far away, so it's not important. Over in this area, the Russian forces attack towards Ostrivsky, and there is shelling reported at Kurakovo. The Russian sources, Ryba, have announced that the Russians have captured Hostry over here, which is a logical thing, because if you look at the mapping, Russian forces captured the prison over there in the southern flanking movement, but with this front line looking at Hostry, there is the chances of Ukrainians still holding a position at Hostry is really low. So the Russian claim that they have captured Hostry makes a lot of sense. And again, you go back to Deep State UA's mapping, you will see the cope that they are doing over here. So north. So you see they use the gray zone to cover up the loss. They cover up the loss of Hostry. Clearly, the Russians cannot just only have control over just this prison. They would have some kind of buffer out from the prison region, and surely this don't make a lot of sense. The Russians would have already overrun Hostry, but maybe they have just some troops in the forest line around here, so they decided that okay, Hostry is not captured. So this is the way how they play with the gray zone, which is actually very disturbing. I don't really like it. This is why I don't play with gray zones. I don't play this game of no cope. So anyway, we move up. So the same situation, if you move up, it is the same around in the Nevelsky. This is Nevelsky, by the way. In the Nevelsky salient, you can see the amount of gray zone that they draw. This is a lot of grounds. A lot of ground that they refuse to admit that they have lost to the Russians. They just put it as a massive piece of gray zone. And this is actually something like this. A huge amount of grounds that actually could be under Russian control already, but they decided to keep it going so that it looks like as if the Ukrainians have some heroic figures that is defending such a far reach of a salient, trying to hold back the Russians' offensive so far away from resupply. And we're talking about distance for a front line now is like 9 kilometers, 8 kilometers from the nearest operational HQ. Is super far away. So yeah, so we shall see how this goes. Over the Khernik region, Russian forces are attacking Zeleny Druhi towards Khernik, Sukirine, and Ukraine. In terms of the front line, we can see the front line change over in the north of Khernik, as well as in the north of Sukirine, and all this allows the Russians to attack from the north of Khernik, creating a double, a two-pronged attack. They can also hit south from the north of Sukirine, and of course Pincer coming from the north of Khernik as well. So, and of course the Russians can also attack northward towards Selidove to attack the south of Selidove as well. So this is a very serious problem for the Ukrainians. This is very hard to defend. We shall see how these continue to develop over in the Khernik region. At the Selidove region, as mentioned, the Russian forces already have a possibility of attacking towards the south of Selidove, which will allow the Russians to attack what they like to do, to attack in a two-pronged attack from Mikhailivka and in the northeast of Selidove. So this will allow easier capture of Selidove. The Russians also allegedly attack in the Marinivka and towards Petrivka. So the fighting at Petrivka does suggest that there might be a frontline change that we do not see on the mapping reporting, because previously the Russians have captured this western part of Novokhorodivka, and but there is no more updates for a long time. There's a high chance that the Russians have already expanded their grounds around this western part of Novokhorodivka, and they are now in striking distance of Petrivka, which is why we see the report of fighting at Petrivka according to the Russian Defense Ministry. There is a possibility, but of course this could also just be shelling reports. But this makes some logical sense. The Russians attacking towards Petrivka from a expanded salient makes perfect sense. So we are talking about Khorodivka. So in this Khorodivka sector, so can I put in everything? Okay. So this Pokrov, this is the main boss, the final boss that the Russians are going to hit for. Fighting is still reported over at Khorodivka. There's the Russian forces retook the salient Krytia, and the Russian sources claim that the Russians have taken Krytia. The fighting have now moved to Krasnaya and Mykolaiivka. So as usual, the fighting reported at Novokhorodivka is also mentioned. So this is the current situation over in the Khorodivka region. So the situation don't change a lot, but tactically, yeah, it is what it is. All this entrenchment that is drawn on the mapping by those is not drawn by me. This is drawn by other people, but they look through the satellite imagery and they just draw. So the take it with a pinch of salt, because they could make mistake. The entrenchment could be destroyed, or there is no one defending the entrenchment, or the entrenchment actually don't exist. They actually just draw wrong. So take it with a pinch of salt. This is just indicative, but there's a high chance that no, there is actually not as heavily defended as it seems on this mapping here. So that's all from the Khorodivka region. In the shelling is already reported over in Milograd and Pokrov already. Bombardments are happening around there. So over the northern flank of the Pokrov front, Russian forces are attacking Novotoretsk as well as Vozdevizhenka. So very minimal reporting around here, so nothing much. We move into the New York front, and at the New York front, all the actions in the northern flank of the northern half of the New York front, particularly. So fighting is reported over at Druzhba, Dashne, particularly at Dashne, there is some heavy fighting reported there. There's fighting reported at Torex. Fighting reported in the Zabalka region, in this district south of Torex. There's fighting reported at New York, Nelipivka, Petrivka, and Skibinivka. So then, of course, the elephant in the room is, of course, the Nelipivka situation. According to the Russian mapping, they claim that this actually corroborates. So the Ryba actually corroborates and getting closer to what DPA is talking about for weeks. I have been talking about this for weeks, that the Russians could actually have already captured or most, if not all, of Nelipivka, including a large part of Zabalka. So the Russian mapping Ryba actually draw it in this way. I think this is pretty much a guesswork, but they did mention that the Russians have captured Nelipivka. This according to the Ryba, the pro-Russian source. Then the fighting is now towards Shibinivka and moving off from Leonidivka. So the fighting is reported at Leonidivka according to Ryba. So they also mentioned updates at Zabalka, that the Russians are now fighting in Zabalka. This is the first report of Zabalka fighting since August, since 23rd August. It's been a long time since we have reports of any fighting in this region here. And the frontline change over here has been even longer, long time ago. However, on the Ukrainian mapping, the reality is super different. They still claim that the lines is around here. So let's take a look at the New York front in the Ukrainian mapping. It looks like this. So this is Nelipivka, and this is Zalizne, and this is New York. And to the Ukrainians, they still have chunk of New York under them, and the Russians only barely just started to attack into the north, into the southeastern outskirts of Nelipivka. This is according to the Ukrainians. They totally ignored the geolocation of Russian forces at Leonidivka, and and this totally cannot corroborate with the reports of fighting over at Skibernivka over here. So and the Russians mapping is way ahead of this. To them, the Russians are still at Zalizny, they are still at New York. The Ukrainians are holding heroic lines around Nelepivka, despite that the fighting constantly is being mentioned by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry to be at Skibernivka in this area here. This is the area that the Russians are allegedly fighting in the area of, and Russians is already geolocated at Leonidivka. So this is a massive discrepancy. So which is why you can see that on the DPS mapping, you can see that the Ukrainian mapping and the Russian mapping is now looking super different. The parallel universe have widened even further. The gap is getting bigger and bigger. So we shall see how this continue to play out. As you see, as I map, this is exactly as per the Ukrainian mapping have mapped. The Russians entered this according to the Ukrainians entered Nelepivka in the southeast, and the Ukrainians still holding positions within New York. So this is exactly the deep state US mapping. Then this is the Russian mapping. In terms of DPA's position, I feel that the front line is even further. I believe that the Russians have taken most of Zabalka, and in fact most of this area here up to Leonidivka. Nelepivka has been I believe that Nelepivka has already been overrun. The Russians have already taken most of Zabalka, which then makes sense for reports of fighting at Skibernivka. So this is why the attacks can be reported in this area here. In Skibernivka. To me, this is more likely to be the case, that the front line actually looks something like this. So, but I cannot corroborate, I cannot just draw it what I think it is. So we just continue to wait for the information. So this is the first time we have some kind of a close-up between what I think is happening versus at least one of the source talking about it. So Ryba is now getting closer to what DPA think is the situation is. So we are getting closer. We shall see how this goes. There's also major situation changing in Torex, with the Russians continue to push towards the center according to the Russian sources. Ukrainian mapping have conceded that the Russians have taken the hill as well as the full control of the prison in Torex. So the Torex situation continues to be difficult for the Ukrainians as the Russians continue to make progress, slow but still progress. So that's the current situation over in the New York front, and we shall continue to monitor the situation. As I mentioned, Ukrainian Defense Ministry continue to talk about Dashne. So we still have no frontline changes or mapping or information to show the changes around here in Dashne. So let's see how this continue to develop. Over in the southern part of Bakhmut, southern flank of Bakhmut, Russian forces attacking Stupochki, Proteshne, Klishevka region, and Bilokhora. Similarly, this I already mentioned, the front line most likely is a lot further than what it looks like right now. So, but this is a continuation of the previous reportings. So we shall see how this goes. Proteshne is very far away. So like I said, the front line may actually look something like this. Over in the northern flank, Russian forces attack at Zaliniansky, Krakorivka, Kalinina, Chastivya, and shelling reported at Mykolaievka. So that's about it. Nothing particularly very special about the fighting around here. We'll move on into the Sivers front. At the Sivers front, fighting is reported at Vimka only, and there is fighting reported at Serbianka. It's unknown where the fighting actually comes from. It could be just shelling, but yeah, I'm not exactly sure why there's always Serbianka being mentioned, but the mapping just can't tell where the fighting actually comes from. So we move on from Sivers. Over at the Kremina front, Russian forces are attacking at Dibrova, Torske, towards Bilohorivka. It could be the one at Luhansk, but I prefer to draw this one because they claim that it's in the Liman direction and Novosadove. So that's all from this Kremina front. Further up to the Sverdlovsk front. At the Sverdlovsk front, Russian forces attacked Chernyshkina, Druzhelyubivka, Makievka, and Nevsky. Particularly for Nevsky, the Russian sources, the pro-Russian source Ryba, have actually claimed that the Russian forces have captured Nevsky. So, though this is the third settlement at this point that is claimed by the Russian sources to have captured by the Russian forces. So there's a lot of captures, and we shall continue to see how this continue. The other two is Nelipivka as well as Horstray. So this is like the three. So let's move on. Over further up north, over in the Pischani front, there's fighting reported in Pischani, around Pischani, unsure where it is. Fighting reported towards Krylyakivka. Ukraine forces is geolocated counter-attacking in the Krylyakivka region. There's fighting reported towards Lozova and Stemakivka. So this is the current strategic situation over in the Pischani region. So we shall continue to monitor the situation around here. In the Kupiansk front, at the Kupiansk front, the fighting reported in the east is no longer reported. There's no fighting reported in Stepova Novoselivka or over in Kotylalivka, which was the report yesterday. This is the report yesterday, so it did not happen today. The fighting is now reported over Sinkivka and Petropavlivka. So this is the current situation in Kupiansk. Nothing particularly special about this, except that this part is missing right now, which means it's not an offensive. Over in the Kharkiv front. The Kharkiv front, Russian forces are attacking at Lipsy, Voschansk, and Taike. So that's all. This is pretty much a rigid front line. It's a static front line. It's standoff-ish. So don't expect too much from this area. This is just a buffer for the Russians. They are not pushing out. And I told you so. So we move on into the Kursk front, or the Kursk front. At the Kursk front, over in the eastern southern flank, Russian forces are continuing their counter-offensive towards Blakovo. This is the main offensive. There is either fire attack or some small attacks over at Chekatskaya, Konopelka, and Mikhailovka. Shelling is reported at Komovka, Milovoy, as well as Guevo and Kazacha Loknia. So this is the strategic situation over at the southern flank. Geolocation of shelling of Ukrainian forces at Blakovo, confirming the attack is ongoing. The main push, of course, in this area is still towards Blakovo. This is the main push in the south. Moving up to the northern flank. In the northern flank, there is fighting reported at Ruskoye Parashnoye, but this is probably just shelling attack. Pravda is getting shelled. Yuzhny got shelled. Ukrainians and Russians continue to clash at Malaya Loknia in this area here. And the Russians are shelling or attacking Olovka as well as Novaya Sorokina. Ukrainian forces are counter-attacking or attacking over at Marivka, but that's about it. The angle of attack probably coming from the east. We shall see how this goes. It's a bit weird. Shelling is reported over at Novo Ivanovka. So, and then Ukrainian forces are geolocated. BMP. We got destroyed by a Lancet south of Agovka. So that's the northern flank generally. There is some weird stuff, like the lack of update, the lack of information or actions over in Kremyanoye, Agovka region. So this is the only one, the Lancet attack. There's a chance that the Ukrainians are struggling to do much around here. So we shall continue to monitor. The northern flank, of course, remains to be super quiet. Over at the western flank, Russian forces continue their counter-offensive. This is the main push at Lyubimovka, Kostilok, Darino, and Nikolaevo, Darino. Shelling is reported at Zuravka, Svertiklovo, and the Ukrainians are counter-attacking at Obukovka and Lyubimovka. So shelling, of course, this is Novo Ivanovka, as I already mentioned, and of course, this other action on the eastern part of this area, I'm not going to mention again. So, and again, for the people that is in the comment talking about, Svertiklovo is already when we captured, you're so slow, you have people already geolocated, the Russians already captured Svertiklovo days ago, blah, blah, blah. Never happened. The Russian Defense Ministry is still talking about shelling over in Svertiklovo, and the front line is still very far away. The main attack is still at Darino, Nikolaevo, Darino, and Tostilok, and the information coming from the Russian Defense Ministry themselves. So there is no indications, no anything that prove that Svertiklovo has been captured by the Russian forces. So fact check yourself, fact check your sources. Don't come to the comments and say, DPA what. There's a reason why, I have my own methodology. I have my own trusted sources that I keep to, because it has been proven over 2 years of reporting to be the most trustworthy sources to follow. But even on their own, like Raiba or Deep State UA on their own is not good enough. I have to do analysis with the comparing notes and reports from different sources to make a judgment call on what is actually the reality on the ground. And even what I say could still be wrong because the information may not be complete. But I have been looking forward to evidence of the Russian forces entering Svetikovo, but it never happened. This has been days. People have been commenting this for days that the Russians have entered Svetikovo. I'm slow, DPA, you're so slow, you're inaccurate, you're wrong, I'm a Ukrainian troll or what. So nice quote. So check your sources. Don't watch or don't read those channels that keep telling you this, all this wrong information. Keep track how many times they are wrong. So anyway, this is what it is. I'm just telling you. Yeah. And then over in the Grushkovo sector. At the Grushkovo sector, the Ukrainian forces are attacking at Novi Put and Medvedze. And the Russians are counter-attacking or shelling the Ukrainian forces at Novi Put. And then there is still shelling reported in the rear positions over at Obodi and Palivka. The important thing to note is that the Ukrainian counter-attack at Obukovka, here is written Boshaya Obukovka. There's two Obukovka around here. There's one here and there's another one here. So it could be the Ukrainians attacking this one or they could be attacking this one. I'm not sure which one. So take it with a pinch of salt. Otherwise, the Ukrainians are pretty stuck. There's no more fighting reported at Veseloye. The last attack was reported on the 20th, which is already a few days ago. So the Ukrainians are not getting any breakthroughs around in this Grushkovo sector, which is kind of pathetic. So in terms of the shelling reports outside in the Sumy region, there is no discernible pattern to it. Sumy, Kotin, Radkivka, Rishki, so Bilopilia, what is this? Badarivskina, as well as Boyara, Lezachi. You can see that there's not a lot of pattern per se. You can say that maybe these are the ones that is attacking towards Krushkovo. Yeah, these are just standby forces. Who knows? These are just real positions, but there's not a lot. There's not a lot of pattern to it. So, and the shelling reports inside Sumy is getting a lot lesser as well, which could be a sign that the Ukrainian troops are getting lesser and lesser in the reserve positions. There is also a geolocation that claims Iskandar destroyed a HIMARS in the Suppression Kinokovo region. And then if going to the Khrushchev region, the shelling south of Khrushchev continues the trend of very little shelling over at Peremoha and Shalihine only. So that's very little. North of Khrushchev, there is basically no more attacks. The entire force that was allegedly preparing for this push towards Oreo, this push, the entire force has been redeployed towards the Grushkovo sector, it seems to me. And thus the fighting is all over here. But this is a horrible place to fight. They are not getting anywhere. And yeah, so that's about it. So anyway, thank you for watching. This is the summary for the day of 942 for the 22nd of September. This is the second time I reported this entire thing. I spent 1 hour to record half an hour. So tiring. So anyway, check out the DPA open mic, and I'll see you guys in the next update.